Hello and welcome to Gierok Farms. In today's video we're going to be putting some new blades on that John Deere haybine. We also have a wagon over here where the deck's starting to sag, so we're going to have to brace that up and get that ready to go. And then we got some other odds and ends to take care of, so we're going to bring you guys along with us. Hope you guys enjoy the video.
Try to do it too quick, you always got a pinch finger.
So we're going to be changing every one of these, and these are called turtles, I believe.
Yeah, turtles or pods.
And there's
Probably clean up some of the junk here. It's kind of when your hay is wet in the morning and the dew, all the moisture's coming, flowing out of it. So basically all this thing is doing is flying around like a lawnmower. Now there's been a lot of talk about these disc bines. I remember when these just came out. A new idea I had, one of the first ones everybody had around here. There was talk about like the sickle mower. Everything was sickle with that reel in the front, and that was more like a scissor cutting your hay. And they claimed like there was concern about the hay coming back better and all that. You know, like some of these golf courses, I've heard they'll use some kind of clipper like that sooner than a lawnmower that flies around in a blade like that.
yeah, because the theory is that this would rip it more than just cut it. So
Rip rather than cut, which I don't know in the long run if it matters much, because if you got really lodged up hay and a lot of grass in it and it's wet, and you don't worry about this thing plugging, this don't plug.
and you can move a lot faster with something
You can
like
move
this.
faster, it's more forgiving. The sickle mower, if you would, well, if you weren't watching when you came out of the row, making sure all were clean, I mean, especially by the road, you would see them streaks in the field. So a lot of times they just have to back up and then you hear that clump go through. So if the hay was really clean, like usually a clean standing second crop, like all alfalfa, I would rather have a sickle mower. But you get in these hills, you got pasture fields where you got those lumps where the manure was, and you get that thick growth, maybe wet conditions in places. It's just all around better. But
Well,
very cheap knife.
While we're looking at the disc spine, you want to talk a little bit about your rollers and the plastic versus, or the rubber versus steel? Because I know you've had experience with both.
There's steel inside there, but yeah, it's got rubber, so the rubber's supposed to be a little more gentle on that. It's all about the alfalfa stem and the leaf. So really what the rolls do is when that stem goes through, it breaks it.
It kind of cracks it so that it dries faster.
So it'll break it, and now there's just a short little piece I got here, but let's see, let's get something. Okay, this is just a piece of grass, but let's say that's an alfalfa stem. You would see it broke like that, like that, like that, you know, maybe in 3-4 places, and then that it allows the water to get out. It's really about the stem, but the rubber is more delicate for so you don't lose the leaves, because the leaves are your protein. I mean, the leaves are really what makes your hay the quality. But in the grasses, it's not. It's more forgiving. It's maybe not even as necessary. So then steel rolls, I think these big custom guys, especially years ago, would prefer to steel. Because if you ran like a branch through here, maybe a fence post, like a steel fence post or electric, I mean, that would rip the rubber. The steel ones, or maybe they were just tougher. I don't think they had as many problems with it. I had one on that new idea. This is an interesting story because my father-in-law had one. He had one of the first ones, and his son said they had a branch stuck in here one time, something about as big as my arm, and it plugged it completely, and he had to use chainsaw to get it out, and it didn't bend the roll. And then I had one years and years later. It was the same design, and I ended up, I was cutting straw with it, and it must have been bunching up underneath here after the combine, and then the big slug went through. And I heard it go through, and then the vibration started, and I had a bent roll. And I think they put cheaper steel inside it. That was my theory. I thought, how could you get a branch stuck in there and not bend it? But I bent it cutting straw. So anyway, eventually we traded that for something better because the pods are smaller. It was good. Now they make bigger pods, and they're all kind of, I don't know, new idea. And well, all them companies now, New Holland. What's out there now? Kuhn makes them. Yeah. There's a lot of them, and the design, for the most part, I don't know. There's different stuff inside this cutter bar. It used to be a big issue how they were put together, but I think they kind of got past that. I think most of the companies got past the issues.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same across the board now.
They come up with a good design where they're not as much for problems. And we got them steep hills, so there's oil inside there. Now, all the oil just flows down the one end. You know, you're always on the low side, but then you come on the other side, and then it's on the other side.
While we're talking about the mechanics of it, this would be your spring that allows it to float, you know, for terrain like ours. So it kind of follows the ground, and then back.
You got a crank up here that you can
Adjust that.
loosen, depending on how much you want it to float.
And then back here, there's normally windrowers, but he took them off.
Well, first of all, you got this flap here. See that'll so if I
Adjust how
set
far
like this.
adjust how far it throws it, right?
Well, it'll throw it like way out, but if you're like on a steep side hill, what I've noticed happens, it all kind of bunches to the low side. Otherwise, I kind of like it because it fluffs it more. I think if you're cutting hand on level, I'd prefer it like that. So then it almost is better for us if it shoots it straight down. But then, yeah, then we had those wings in here that you can windrow it more. And I took them out, and that's the only really thing about these machines I don't like, is we're not able to lay our hay out as wide as the cut. We should be able to, this is a 10-foot cut, we should be able to lay our hay out 10 foot. And it's only laying it out 7 foot, because where the wheels go, and it's because of the pods, so the two outside pods spin the hay to the inside. So then, of course, if the drying conditions aren't perfect, or the hay's super heavy, we just go through with that tedder. And I'm knowing guys that'll swat it completely, so it's easier to cut. You're not driving on your hay. It's all on that pile. It goes on right underneath the tractor. Then they come back later with a tedder that'll ted like 2 windrows at once, so you can really make good time.
Yeah, so basically what we're trying to say is the reason those are off is to make a wider windrow that will dry faster and better than. But then if you were going to chop it and you wanted it wetter, you'd narrow it up.
Well, what we do with the chopping, we still, some guys will make it wide anyway. It just dries faster, so they're able to chop sooner. We got a 7-foot head on the chopper, so I don't like to narrow it up too much unless the hay is not very thick. But we let it, we maybe only get half as wide, and then we're able to use the rake to grab the one and set it next to the other, not quite on top of it, and then that 7-foot heads. So we're only raking every other windrow, which really makes a huge difference. So then, as far as getting all that ash in your feet and dirt or stone or anything, because a rake usually picks up stuff. This way your hay's cleaner.
It allows you to touch it less.
Yeah. If we had a bigger farm or a leveler farm, I think this would be a 12-foot. Because to dry hay, I mean, the big windrow is very seldom.
Yeah.
Most of the time we're better off to, so when we ted it, then you can rake it any direction you want again, or take as much as you want. So when the hay is, let's say the day is questionable, the humidity's high, we just grab a little less with the rake. You better to make more windrows, and I've had it too, where then at the end of the day we realized we were running short of time, have somebody go up ahead with the rake and throw maybe 2 together in front of the baler. That's very rare we do that, but just to get it done before.
We gotta keep them moving.
Yeah, it's just the baler will take it, but you got to have it. I mean, you got to be able to spread it out enough so it dries.
All right, so we're gonna start changing over them blades and getting the cutter all ready.
You know, you see here, like this guy, he maybe is even bent a little. He might have hit a rock or some piece of steel, and that's the opposite one.
Oh, look at the size difference there. How much steel is left on the new one versus a used one.
And I mean, these are really cheap to replace, and they're easy to replace, so I think you're better off replacing them than just, you could have this down the nub and it's still mow hay, but just not as nice.
I know guys that got rockier fields or junkier fields, and they'll have parts and tools in the cab, and they'll be replacing these a couple times a day if they nail some huge rock or something.
And I do, but I don't have, because we don't have I think there's a couple places where there's a piece of bedrock sticking through on some of those pasture fields.
Yeah.
It's just good to have that stuff, but you're right. You got a rocky farm, like some of them rocks are super hard. They're harder than concrete. That gets rolling around in here because it won't go through. It'll just keep throwing it back ahead, and then another knife hits it.
Yeah.
By the time you know it, you got 4 or 5 of them banged up.
And that's a benefit too. Like we were, if you watched our seeding video where we dragged the field, you know, you're not necessarily getting rocks that way, but you're creating a smoother field for for your cutter. So.
Well, they got those rollers too. You ever seen those? I never seen those when we were kids, or even
Yeah, they're not very common in our area, but I know a lot of people that do have them.
So the little bit we got, I'll make it a rule just to pick them up. You see it there, pick it up, because it ain't going nowhere. The frost will keep pushing it back up. Even if the tire steps it in, the frost will push it back out. And next year you'll be rolling it around again between your machines. Yeah. So you're just preventing.
Then when you're changing these, you got to get them lined up to these holes here so you can pop the bottom out and then slide your blade out.
Did that jump in right? Yeah, that must be right.
Are they supposed to be looser like that? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little play there, but sometimes that won't jump up in there right. As long as you're, you know, these got a little junk build up, that's why they're not loose. Yeah, but there's a little play. And then I'll save a few that ain't too beat up just for spares in case well, when their other ones get kind of worn, instead of sticking a brand new one in there, you might want to stick a kind of half-worn one in there to finish out whenever.
So we got all that taken care of. Now we're gonna start moving some equipment around because we gotta put away that cultivator.
Okay, I'll let you start managing that. I gotta get some blocks. name of this wagon?
That's that Minnesota one.
They call it a Minnesota. I thought these wagons were built in the prison.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that too, that they're built in the prison.
I mean,
Some kind of work program within the prison.
I suppose, and it's just welding. It's all just tubing.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
See, now these got this. That's a Corey running gear, and they're wider than your standard. And I don't know, they probably still sell them today. But they're 9. If you turn so there's 11L wheels. If you turn your rims the opposite way, you can get 9 feet. You know, your running gear is 9 feet with your rack. So then it's just more stable.
This is why we brought it in, because this deck is starting to sag.
Yeah, and see, before I got this wagon, it was outside. I don't leave them outside, but that's what happens, and everything is getting not so right. We replaced some stuff in there. I put different things in there. See, the one thing I like about these in our farm, they're built kind of light. This wouldn't be the most durable bale rack. I mean, there's different areas in here. Like some of these will have this angle iron here will come all the way across here. There'll be some sort of gussets in the corners here for more strength. And we could add all that, but then the wagon gets so heavy to yank around behind the baler on some steep hill. And the other thing is on this was set up so it's low, and it's got a low front. Some of the fronts are way up here, and when you go through those dips, I find myself stopping and letting the bale come out. And then otherwise it falls down in between there. You almost have to stop, pick it up. It just gets wedged up under the wagon and ends up making a mess. So anyhow, they're light, and most of the time we can't fill them super full anyway when we get in those spots. We gotta put a couple stringers across there.
We're just gonna jack it up and brace it up with some
Pretty simple stuff.
boards.
Nothing we haven't done before. It's just simple use. Maybe only got wet maybe 3-4 times in its life. So the floor and everything's pretty good, but the tubing, the backs get a little banged up when the bale's hitting on from all the jarring around. And then you do a little welding, you add a little scrap iron in there. Nothing a farmer can't handle. We could use those 2x4s I sawed, but they're only 8 feet. And then I got another option here. And it's been laying in the shed here long enough, and maybe it was time to use it. This thing over here, I could rip this. They really ain't worth a whole lot around by us because nobody bales hay like they used to. But what ends up, I think, happening is they'll usually leave them lay outside or sit outside because they take a lot of space up and they're not worth a lot, so you leave them out and you put other stuff in the shed. And then floors get bad, tires get bad, and then pretty soon you don't want to use it anymore. Yeah, so then if they're not right, well then who wants to take that out in the field and have this thing breaking down with It is now, probably. Just on the side. It's good.
So do you want?
Push it towards me something like that. Okay. I'm flush here. What do you got there?
Flush is what?
The end of the rack.
Oh, I got maybe 6 inches, so you come back 3.
Something like that. I got 3.
Okay, do you like where you are with the tire there?
Well, yeah. We'll put it on the other side of it, but we need to mark it to where I notch it.
Yeah.
All right. Jack down. I don't want to get going with some screws.
Well, we took care of the hay rack, but thanks for coming along with all these little projects we've been doing today. A lot of stuff should be ready now for second crop. We're gonna fuel up tractors, but I'm gonna end off the video here. Wanted to thank you all for watching. If you guys wanna see more of what we're doing, you can go check us out on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all at Gierok Farms. And then if you'd ever wanna send us a letter or something, we have a PO box as well. So thank you all again, and we'll see you all in the next video.